Former funeral director Robert Bush is in line for prison justice, but not in the way he normally is, or it normally is with the bacon bashes. But I will get into it. The funeral director was sentenced to 20 years in prison at Hull Crown Court on the 31st of July 2026, which was Thursday just gone. And I have had a few people requesting and sending emails and messages saying, could you cover this case, please? And I did receive a message of someone who has a partner inside of HMP Hull. And guess what? On the Friday, he was shanghaied, ghosted, which means in prison terms, someone, normally it happens if they've been disruptive or whether they obviously just want rid of the prisoner. And Robert Bush, I will tell you a little bit if you don't know about, well, I'll tell you plenty about it if you don't know about the case. And he was based in Hull. He operated the Hull-based Legacy Independent Funeral Directors and pleaded guilty to 67 offences. So shanghaied, ghosted, in the middle of the night. It's to get rid of somebody, like I've just said, either who's been disruptive or, in this case, the inmates were lining up because he had operated 2,000 funerals in total. And in this case alone, there was 200 victims or round about that. I will get into the details shortly, people, but I'll just keep telling you about he's been shanghaied, and there were screws and prisoners who had been affected by this absolute wronging. And yes, I am calling him a wronging. Even though this was all to do with fraud, he was an absolute wronging because one of the cases or one of the decomposed bodies, shall we say, at the premises was one with the ashes, of a stillborn baby. He had given the mother of this baby a little coffin with ashes in a year previously. And little did she know that poor little mite that she lost was still inside of that funeral parlour. That fucking wronging had kept decomposed bodies along with the ashes of little ones like that as well. So I'll just give you a quick case overview, but he's in line for prison justice because, like I've just said, because it's in Hull, he was in Hull prison, 2,000 funerals he's operated, 200 victims. Imagine how many families, or families rather, have inmates inside of there. The screws knew they had to get rid of him, but they didn't send him very far. He's in HMP Armley. So Bush stockpiled 30 decomposed bodies at his premises rather than burying or cremating them. He left remains in body bags for months, gave families the wrong ashes, and defrauded hundreds of customers through fake funeral plans. And for that, he received a 20-year sentence. It was going to be going to a trial in October of this year, but he pleaded guilty. Obviously, the evidence racked up against him. He couldn't get out of it. So he took a plea bargain, and he pleaded guilty because the sentence would have been, if he got found guilty, which he would have, 25 years. So he saved himself another 5 years inside of prison. The judge condemned his actions as heartless, shocking and disgraceful, noting the scale of trauma inflicted on grieving families was entirely unprecedented. But I will tell a little bit further on about some more of the judge's sentencing remarks. But as you can imagine, absolute wrong doing that type of thing. But right, I'll go into it because I've got a few different articles which I will read so I do not get any facts wrong. And before I go any further, the person that gives us the info on him getting shanghaied and ghosted also found out that up until the day he was sentenced, he was still a funeral director. He was still working as a funeral director. Absolutely outrageous. So Robert Bush was sentenced to 20 years for giving families wrong ashes, retaining corpses for months, and stealing charity donations. It was up to 750 grand, $750,000 he defrauded. So, 2 seconds, people. So, the judge heard emotional testimony about how he gave families the wrong ashes for their cremated loved ones. Imagine the worst thing ever, having to bury a family member. Cremate a family member, losing a family member, going to a funeral parlour and going through all that anguish. Then to find out you've got the wrong ashes. Oh, imagine going with your family and scattering the ashes or having them in your house and they're not even fucking ashes. They're from a burnt bit of wood or something. Absolute wronging. Also, what I've mentioned before, he improperly retained corpses for months and stole charity donations collected at the services afterwards. Robert Bush, 48, was sentenced at Hull Crown Court after a 5-day hearing in which more than 200 victims described the devastating impact of his crimes. He previously pleaded guilty to 67 charges for the crimes that took place over 12 years at Legacy Independent Funeral Directors in Hull. Among those who spoke in court was Jasmine Beverly, who I mentioned before, whose son, Sonny, was stillborn on May the 13th, 2022. Investigators found his ashes in a brown paper bag on the floor of the funeral director's premises more than a year after Bush handed her a little blue coffin and told her Sonny's ashes were inside. Now that is fucking disgusting. Like I've just said, someone having to go through the torture and torment of having a stillborn, then having to go through the torment of the funeral parlour, the cremation, and then finding out a year later that his ashes were fucking left on in the floor in a brown paper bag. Well, guess where he's going to end up? On the bacon wings. He'll be on the bacon wings getting protection. And once you're on the VP wings, whether you're a proper bacon or not, whether you've done anything, the little ones, you go on that wing, you're a bacon. Robert Bush is a bacon. He's on the bacon wings for his own protection. So getting back to what Jasmine said, when I discovered what had happened, it reopened the trauma in a way I cannot fully describe. She said, recalling the pain of losing her child, it felt like being pulled back into the darkest time of my life. The grief, anxiety and distress returned with such intensity that I again found myself struggling mentally and emotionally, which you would do, because it's one of the worst things that could ever happen, losing a little one, having a stillborn baby. About 50 people learned they had been given the wrong ashes for their loved ones when police raided the funeral home and found urns and packages labelled with their names. The court also heard that Bush defrauded 172 people out of 755 grand, including money from fake funeral plans. He also collected cash donations on behalf of bereaved families during memorial services, but didn't turn the money over to the designated charities. So he's been stealing from the charities as well. That is a fucking wrong'un. The case came to light in March 2024 when Bush was on vacation in Arizona and asked the directors of another funeral firm to help with a body recovery while he was away. A worker at Bush's funeral home told the other firm's directors out of the blue that bodies had been at the site for years. So a worker out of the blue. Bodies have been at the site for years. Where the fuck was your duty of care? You worked at that funeral home, you seen what was going on. I bet there's a lot of locals after your blood as well. They called the police, who discovered a horror scene at the funeral home with bodies in various stages of decomposition, stored on the racks of a cold storage area, and one naked corpse lying on a stretcher on the floor. What the actual? And the fucking people that were working there were around this on a daily basis. Naked, decomposed bodies lying on floors and loads piled up on shelves. What the? Absolutely fucking outrageous, if you ask me. So, I'm just going to go into a little bit about the investigation as well. So finally, from the very beginning, the families and all those affected in this case have always remained at the heart of our investigation, which obviously they would do. Their understanding, support, and contribution throughout the duration of the inquiry has been truly invaluable, and without them, we simply could not have achieved the outcome we have today. Right, now I'm going to go back to the judge's sentencing. Where is it at? So the judge's sentencing remarks when... 2 seconds, people. So betrayed at most vulnerable. What stayed with those who heard the evidence was not the criminal offences alone that hurt families. It was how Bush betrayed them at their most vulnerable. He behaved in a way utterly at odds to the expectations of a funeral director and setting for such high drama. There is no oak panelling, no green leather-bound legal textbooks like the courtrooms you see on TV dramas. But while the setting was ordinary, the consequences of this case were not. Obviously not when he was involved. Little ones like that, leaving a little one's ashes in a bag on the floor for over a year is absolutely fucking disgusting. But there was attempts. In a court hearing in December 2025, Bush's legal team tried to persuade the judge to throw his case out. They claimed he could never have a fair trial because the sheer number of funerals he had conducted meant an unbiased jury, where they could have gotten a jury from out the area who wouldn't have had anything to do with any of the bereaved or any of the decomposed bodies that were left in his funeral place, because he had hosted 2,000 funerals. But the judge demanded to know the postcodes where Bush had conducted funerals and explored whether jurors could be brought in by coach from outlying areas, exactly like I've just said. But I am going to get to that bit where the judge... Give me 2 seconds, people. Judge Mr. Justice Hilliard admitted when sentencing Bush there was no precedent for the case, probably why, among the gathered news journalists last week, there were TV producers planning to pitch shows to major streaming platforms. Members of the press from across the world dispatched by news channels, radio programs, podcasts, and newspapers to catch a glimpse of Bush, who until the first day of his sentencing hearing did not break his silence. But as you can imagine, this would be a Netflix drama or BBC drama because of how shocking it actually is. And you can just imagine a series getting made out of this. So in his sentencing remarks, the judge acknowledged Bush caused anguish and pain on a scale beyond comprehension. The defendant was so preoccupied with his own enrichment that he behaved in a shocking and disgraceful way. Bush's apparent detachment was striking throughout all the court proceedings. The family man appeared disconnected from the pain he inflicted on his victims, from the grieving families he betrayed, from the local community who saw him fraudulently obtain hundreds of thousands of pounds to fund a luxurious lifestyle of holidays, expensive hobbies and jewellery. So that was his motive behind it. He didn't give a toss about the families of the bereaved. He didn't give a toss about the victims that were lying in his fucking parlour, just strewn across the floor and lying naked. It's fucking absolutely outrageous. So in October 2025, that's when he pleaded guilty, and he wasn't even remanded into custody. In simple terms, he admitted defending families out of defrauding families out of genuine funerals and giving them the wrong ashes, but at the same time denying he had failed to provide their loved ones with a proper burial. Of course you fucking did. Of course you denied them a proper fucking burial. He left families and journalists scratching their heads. How could both be true? It left families facing an 8-week trial, which was scheduled for October this year. So, obviously, he had to plead guilty. So when Bush changed his plea to guilty on 67 charges in April 2026, he walked into court, as he had at every previous hearing, refusing to let families see his face. So that's what he was going into court as. I'll just show you. So nobody could see his face. Well, guess what? There's plenty of people inside the system will know your face. And like I've said previously, he'll be on the bacon wings. Because even though he hasn't done any S offences, which always lands them on the bacon wings, the VPs, the nonces, the predators, the bacons, but doing something to this magnitude and then going on protection, because like I've said previously, and as you heard from Jasmine in her statement, a little stillborn baby and other youngsters amongst all of his victims, because that's exactly what they were, victims of his fucking outrageous behaviour just to live a lavish lifestyle. He could have conducted it properly in a proper manner and still lived that lifestyle. But greed got the better of him and he became lazy and he just left bodies decomposing and giving families whatever he fucking pleased. But I just thought I would bring that to your attention, people, because there will be a lot of people that doesn't know about this case. I didn't really know much about it myself until I was getting emails and messages. So I did delve into it. I had a look into it over the weekend, but I wanted to come on bringing the straight facts on here. Hence the reason why I was reading out those articles that were online. But if you are still enjoying the content, people, remember to comment, like and subscribe. Take care, people. Enjoy the rest of your day. But most importantly, stay safe.